You guys are in for a real treat today as we get to talk to some really cool members of the community. Almost an international theme, as a couple of these collectors are international and have a surprisingly similar story early on with collecting. And I do want to make this a regular segment here on the YouTube channel. So if you want to come on the show and tell your comic collecting journey, I'd love to have you. Just send an email to brycecomics@gmail.com and we'll set it up. And it might just go out into the future and we'll just consistently do this. It's certainly a labor of love because these are the worst performing videos on my YouTube channel and they take the most amount of time to edit them. But the people that do watch them have a tremendous response and say that they really enjoy it, and I thoroughly enjoy it. By the time I'm done recording, 3 or 4 face-to-face interviews, I am just flying because I put a lot of content out and the only thing you seem to get back is comments, which is great, but a lot of them are negative, and those are the ones that just really echo the loudest in your mind. And so to get face-to-face with subscribers and get the long-form story is just truly rewarding for me. So I want to continue to do it. And with that in mind, before we get too far into it, I want to mention that we have new merch finally. After much requested, we have some Bryce Comics hats available at the website. They're $30, or you can add one to any order for $20. So in the cart, we have 2 styles here, the classic black and this new charcoal gray with the brown leather patch and the black back. So you should be able to use the cart. In the cart, there should be a feature, a drop down to add a hat for $20 to any item if you are so inclined. We also do a monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe, comment, and like, and you're entered to win a free slab each and every month. Bryce Comics is always buying. We have some really exciting new collections coming in next week. And if you're looking to sell your comic collection, I'll get you a fast, fair quote and get you paid quick. And then lastly, follow us over on Whatnot for $1 starts on vintage slabs and so much more. We have slab shows usually every Friday, and there's a link down in the description for $15 towards your first purchase if you're new to Whatnot. So let's hop in the computer, let's hop across the pond and go all over the world to talk to these collectors and hear their cool stories. Ahmar, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we emailed a little bit back and forth, and you have a very interesting story and history with comics. And rather than me trying to recount it, I hand it off to you. Just introduce yourself and give us your history and comic book journey.
So I was born in Pakistan. I won't tell you the year because that will date me, but I'm quite young. And we lived in the largest city in the country, which is Karachi. And we were put in a school. My parents, we are just 2 brothers. So they put us in a school where the medium of teaching is the national language called Urdu, right? So our elementary school was spent studying history, geography, all the subjects in Urdu, except one subject, English. And then my father was in the government service. So he was from Karachi, he was posted to the capital city of Islamabad. And so we had to change schools. And they put us in a missionary school called St. Mary's Cambridge School. This school had all the subjects in English except one subject, which was Urdu. My brother and I could not speak English at all, barely a few words or sentences. And now we were in what we called an English medium school. So my parents were desperate so that we could learn the language quickly. And they didn't really know what to do. So they took us to various bookstores, various mediums, and tried to teach us English, and nothing caught our attention until one day they took us to a secondhand bookstore and where we saw this pile of comics. And the pictures attracted us. So first comic that they picked up was a Tales to Astonish number 88 and Spider-Man number 37. We came home. Now we had all these action pictures. We were 2 boys and could not tell what the story was. We could not really tell what they were saying to each other. So we went after it with a passion, and within 1 year, learned the language and started becoming fluent in it, which has served us to this day. Along the way, while we were reading these comics, and then it became an obsession, And we went out and started hunting them and started collecting them in all the bookstores and secondhand bookstores and so on and so forth. And along the way, we learned our morals from the heroes of what was right and wrong, which was, there are two different cultures. So we got kind of westernized in it. Well, my brother more than I developed this passion for coming to America. He came to America younger than me by 2 years, but he was the first to arrive over here. As we were reading these comics, I got involved into them much more than him. He fashioned himself after Tony Stark and Iron Man, minus the Playboy portion of it. But he went to MIT, he became an electrical engineer, he went into computer sciences, he became an entrepreneur. Me, I obviously could not become either Spider-Man or Submariner, but was fully and totally in love with Dharma and Gwen Stacy. And in issue 37 of Submariner, they first killed off Dharma. And then in 121, they killed off Gwen Stacy. And by this time, I was done. My two loves had been brutally murdered.
Oh, no.
So then I stopped reading comics, went to med school, got married, had children. And then through a quirk of fate, landed up in... my brother had already been here since 1980. But I landed 10 years later in 1990. And to make a long story short, in med school, I had two friends that were from America and had gone to med school in Pakistan. So they had moved over here. They had moved back home because they were born and brought up here. So when I came in 1990, they said, you are the only one missing out of the three of us, because we were the terrible trio in school. And they insisted that I come. I was married to my wife, who was born in California and had also gone back to Pakistan to study medicine and be in med school. So I asked her, I said, do you want to move back to America? And she said, yeah, sure, why not? So I arrived here in 1991. And now it had been 13 years or 14 years since I had picked up a comic or read a comic or done any, even though I still kept all the comics that I had collected in Pakistan, but they were comics that we had read over and over and memorized them. And so they were not in any presentable condition. So I started my residency over here, and I had gone to a 7-Eleven. This is in Brooklyn. And I was waiting in line, and there was a Rolo, the things that, they used to have in...
A spinner rack.
Spinner, right.
Yeah.
And there were comics stacked on it. And one comic caught my eye. So I picked it off the rack and started flipping through it. And the owner of the 7-Eleven said, are you going to read the comic in line or are you going to buy it? Mm-hmm. So I got embarrassed and I said, okay, I'll buy the comic. So that was Spider-Man 361.
What a great jumping in point. Yeah, you picked a good one to come back to.
Yes. Yeah. So then I was hooked again. Time had passed. I had missed all the middle of it. I had missed the late 70s and all the 80s, right? And I jumped back into comics in the 1990s and now I started prowling all the back issue bins, and I had a much wider selection to choose from in New York. Mm-hmm. So then I started backtracking, and I started buying all the new comics and trying to complete my collection going backwards. And the two major ones that I was interested in was obviously Spider-Man and Submariner. So I don't have a complete run of Spider-Man. I have from issue 3 till 700. I don't have 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And I have all the Tales to Astonish from 60 to 101, and then Submariner from 1 to 72, which was the first one.
Is there anything else you want to share or any advice you might have for the comic book YouTube community that you want to share?
What I wanted to say was that reading comics does not really classify you as a nerd. You can have a normal life
Yeah.
and still read comics.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Ahmar, that was amazing. We're gonna probably use almost every minute of that. I really enjoyed hearing your rich history, and I'm just so grateful that this medium of YouTube has brought us together, and so many people are gonna benefit from hearing your story. So just thank you so much for coming on today.
Pleasure talking to you, Bryce. We'll keep in touch.
All right, take care. Greg, or as it says there on the screen, Lithograph, thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been a longtime friend and supporter of the channel. We've talked back and forth. It's really good to finally meet you and get you here on camera and just free form talk about your comic collecting journey and why. Maybe you could just start by introducing yourself and why comics are important to you.
I started collecting comics in the very late 1980s. I was a little kid. I was about 10 years old. My dad would go out to the 7-Eleven. He would pick up cigarettes. He would get gas. I walked in the store with him one time and saw big magazine rack and then a comic spinner. So I went and I picked up a book that looked really cool. I brought it up to my dad and I said, "Can we buy this?" And I actually have it. So this is the first book I ever bought. My dad got it for me. It's Thor Annual number 14. It's not a key. I just thought it looked cool. And it has a $2 cover price. And the reason I say that is my dad saw the cover price and I got the story that everybody loves to get is when I was a kid, those were 10 cents a piece. And I don't know. And he didn't want to pay for it, all that good stuff. But he got it and it started a lifelong obsession of the hobby. I mean, I kind of never looked back. I had a few spots here and there throughout the 90s when I went to college and through high school and whatnot where I would collect here and there. But I'm from a small town. We didn't have a local comic shop. So I would go to the flea market. I would go to whenever we would visit one of the bigger cities. I'm in East Tennessee, so we would visit Knoxville, and I would go to Knoxville, and I would ask my mom and dad, "Can you take me to the comic book shop, for something?" But we did have a couple of stores local. There was like an Ingles, which is a grocery store. We had a Walmart that sold comics, and they sold newsstands. And at the time, at that time, you didn't want newsstands. You wanted the Todd McFarlane art in the corner. You didn't want the barcode. My copies of these early books that I bought, and I kept everything in really good shape, are all newsstands. So my Spawn #1, my like Iron Man 282 are all barcode. Unfortunately, I did not pick up Spider-Man 300, ASM 300 at the time. That was one of the I came in just a little bit after that. I've kept all those books. Yes, yep, I have that exact book you're pointing at in a barcode in a 9.8 as well. Yep.
So you have a 9.8.
The one I bought as a kid off the rack at a grocery store, I got a 9.8 when I sent it in.
Incredible.
Look, basically, when I started going to college, I lived in some apartments behind a flea market. And my roommate at the time, I was living with my cousin. There was a flea market right next to where we lived. And my cousin went there one day, he came back and he said, "Hey, there's a guy over here that sells books." And he meant like real books, like prose novels, because I was reading a lot of novels. And I thought, I'll go check it out. So I went in and he had some comics. So I started looking and he had a series that I never could get as a kid. It was the Lobo series, the 4 issues from the early 90s where he turns into the Lobo we know today. And then he says, "Oh, do you like comics?" And I said, "Yes." Well, come to find out, he was a major comic book collector and he was turning into a major dealer. And he had started setting these things up at the flea market. Flash cut to a few years later, he ended up owning a brick and mortar store, but I knew him throughout this time. His name was Stan Davis. He's been passed away now about 20 years, but he was about 60 when I met him. He called me and said, "I got a collection in." He said, "Before I put it on my floor," this is when he was still at the flea market, "because I want you to come look at it." And he lived about an hour away. Got there and it's just a standard house, him and his wife. His wife's name was Gail, super nice woman. I walk in, right on the shelf when I walk in on the right is an X-Men #2, just sitting there. And I'm looking around and there's just comics everywhere. He takes me into his garage. He's got a 2-car garage. There's no cars in it. It is stacked with long boxes, 4 and 5 high. And he's got this little path to kind of walk around where he can get to all of them. And I'm just sitting in here just like, what in the world? And he says, oh, I've got all kinds. He said, I've got books in here from the 50s and 60s. I just don't know where they're at, but they're in here somewhere. Really great guy. And I've always kind of wanted to tell that story. And it was this 60-year-old man that kind of came out of nowhere that changed my life. And I mean, I've been just knee deep in comics ever since then. Stan also got me involved in a series called Sandman Mystery Theater. And I'm sure most of you are going to know what that is. That's the Wesley Dodds Golden Age Sandman. I picked up that run about halfway through or something like that from him. And then I think I finished it out as it was coming out. I can't remember exactly when it ended, but I got the full run. Well, as a kid, Wizard Magazine told me, the first appearance of the Sandman Wesley Dodds is New York World's Fair 1939. I've always kind of been looking out for it, never could find it. It's almost a ghost. I mean, it hardly ever shows up even on eBay. It's always expensive.
I'm scratching my brain going 19.
It is. Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story about that book then. This will be good for people to know. Wesley Dodds, the original Sandman, he was a member of Justice Society of America. He was one of the founding. There's two books that are very important. One is Adventure Comics 40, and it has him on the cover with his gas gun and gas mask and everything.
Okay.
Well, that is his first conceived story. That was the story that was kind of supposed to come out first, almost like a Black Suit Spidey or Gambit kind of situation. But at the time, the New York World's Fair was going on in New York, which lasted about a year and a half. And they printed an 8-page Sandman story in the World's Fair Comics, which was a book that came out, and it was at the fair.
Yeah.
And then, but it predates Adventure Comics 40 by several weeks, to my knowledge. And CGC does acknowledge this. On their label, they'll put first published appearance of Sandman is the New York World's Fair. The book is a ghost, and I never could find it. I just kind of gave up, but I've always had it in the back of my brain. A little bit of a segue from this story. I bought a book, First Appearance of Mr. Freeze, from a good friend of mine, and he had it in a 1.8. And I'm a high grade collector, but I got that book, and I'm like, am I happy with a 1.8? And then I kind of got it in my brain. I was like, I like 1.8. That's kind of a neat number. It's kind of a unique. We go to Heroes Con this year, and I'm talking to my good friend Greg from Buzzard Brothers Comics. And I had actually lost two deals on a New York World's Fair 1939 in the 2 months prior to Heroes. Greg was trying to facilitate one. It kind of fell through. Then that book was sold to another guy. And I contacted that guy who was a seller himself. And he also had sold it. It was a 2.5. So I go to Heroes Con, my wife and I go, and I'm like, maybe I'll find, 1.8 of this book. Ha ha, and we're laughing about it. You know where this story's going already, probably. There are 4 1.8 blue labels in the world of that book. There's only about, God, I want to say 60 blue labels, period, of that book.
I say from that year,
most are restored.
100,
I've got like a short box on day one of Heroes that were there 10 minutes. I gave my box to my buddy Greg at his booth to kind of store. And my wife can't sit still, so she kind of walks around the corner. And then she very kind of quickly comes back around the corner and she goes, you need to go over here right now. And I knew when she said it, I was like, oh boy, she's found this book. I've never physically seen one in my life. And I look. So I'll go around and my eye goes straight to it. Right there it is, New York World's Fair. But it's an old slab and it's an old label. It's got like a crack in the slab. I mean, it's an early graded book. Well, I can't get to it. There's a big row of boxes in front. And it's on the wall, obviously. And there's a guy standing there. And I said, hey, what's the grade on that? And he looked closer. He goes, it's a 1.8. And I'll censor the word, but I looked for my wife and I said, no freaking way. And I couldn't believe it. And Heroes had CGC on site and they were doing grading, but they were doing reholdering. So I got the book. I took it straight to my buddy Greg, who had a stack of stuff he was going to get reholdered, including a few of my books. Put that one on top, and here it is. So I finally got it after looking forever.
New York World's Fair numbers.
See if I can get close to
1939, from 1939. First published appearance of Sandman, blonde-haired Superman on covers, Zatara and Slam Brady stories. See the cover. So
there's the blonde-haired Superman.
Okay.
And then there's the Sandman. That's what he looks like.
Right.
He's technically on the cover.
I totally recognize it now. Yeah. Did you look at this book and consider it as being an old label? Did you consider to just have it regraded?
Well, I did for a second, but then I'm so attached to these 1.8s.
Oh, you wanted the 1.8.
I wanted a 1.8.
Right.
So finding this in this grade was almost like something I say to people. It's like, don't be afraid. What do they say? A low grade's better than no grade sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to kind of adjust your desires a little bit because you can really back into some really nice books. And
Yeah.
I was also very surprised at how satisfied I was just to have the book.
What do you collect now? I see in the background a lot of raw book boxes and some
Oh,
slabs and some
I've
pops and
got
stuff.
I've got about 16,000 books. I'm not a seller, so I've got almost everything I've ever bought.
And
And
we should note too, because early on you mentioned, something about your wife. You're one of the
yeah,
very few people in the hobby
oh
whose
yeah.
wife is also in the hobby, right?
Yes, my wife is a diehard collector and she arguably spends more money than I do. So
Yeah.
at the same Heroes Con that I bought this World's Fair at, I mean, I was 10 minutes into this thing and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go home. It's like, here, my budget's done here. And well, at the same Heroes Con, she was actually patient and she's been looking for a Batman 42 forever, which is the Catwoman cover where the Golden Age Batman, where she's kind of. So my wife was going around Heroes Con. She passed up on this book in a lower grade, was patient. And it was kind of bugging her. She's like, I don't really see that book. I've been looking for it. Do I go ahead and get it? But she walked around, she waited, she found the right one, and she found this copy in a 3.5.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
And it presents extremely well because the back cover is where all the damage is at. And it's kind of
Some of
hard to
those,
see.
yeah, some of those Golden Age books, man, they look like 9 O's and there'll be a 3.5.
Yes, and
Yeah.
this one is very. I mean, if I held my hand over the grade and you looked at it up close, you're going to think it's like a 5, maybe a 6. It's another case of be patient to a point because even when she saw this one, I was like, okay, you need to. We don't need to mess around here because somebody's going to get this thing.
Right.
But no, but she is a collector. She's also a reader. I've been with her 25 years. When we started dating, I started asking, hey, because she was a big reader of, again, real books. I started saying, hey, would you read a comic book if I gave you one, like a trade or something? And she was certainly open to it. I can't remember the first thing I gave her, but she, at some point, she read Watchmen, she read Sandman. I was giving her all this stuff. Then I got her on Preacher of all things when we first started dating. And I said, well, this is the test. If she likes Preacher, then it's going to work. Sure enough, she liked it, and then she
Wow,
went to
dude,
college.
you're so lucky, man. You're so
I
lucky.
never realized how
Every
lucky I
every
was until
everybody in
later
the
on.
comments right now just going crazy. I mean, what would can you imagine? The problem is
Yeah.
your wife spends more money
Yes.
than you
I
do
mean,
on comics,
this is her book. This was not my book, and
right?
this is not a cheap book.
I would have to give a shout out to my now ex-wife, who at the time the opposite problem of you, and she wasn't spending money on comics. She was, I think a lot of people can relate to this, was really questioning all of the packages that kept
Oh,
showing up on the porch, going,
yeah.
how much are you spending on comics? How much are you spending? And because of that, I started my business. If it wasn't for my ex-wife being
That
like,
is hilarious. I didn't know
yeah.
that.
So I said, in order, how can I order all of these comics that I want to order without getting badgered by my wife? I'll make it a business, and then it's for the business, and then all of the pestering stopped, and it
Yeah.
launched a career that,
Well, there you go. I mean, it's
yeah.
funny
So
how these things send you on your path.
exactly. So shout out to the wives, whether you support or you don't. If you twist it the right way, can have a happy ending. But was there anything else you wanted to share? Any advice or tips you
Uh,
want to give?
I would say be patient, and one thing I see a lot of on the internet, especially like the Instagram channels where I'm at, it's you want to not fall for FOMO, and collect what you like, and you're probably going to go in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you start chasing things that you think speculating is really tough, and there's a lot more misses than hits usually.
No.
So I always tell people, it's like collect what you love, and if you like it, somebody else is going to like it. And then if it's something that a lot of people like,
Mm.
that's where you kind of fall into some good stuff.
Well, listen, Greg, I appreciate it, man. And hey, this was a long time coming. I'm glad I
Yeah.
finally got to
Yep.
meet you and get you on the show. And we'll see you in the comments. Richard, thank you so much for coming on the show. We went back and forth a little bit on email, and I decided to not even go back and read it. I just want to just start from scratch and just hear your story. So that's what we're here to do today. No agenda, really, just sharing your comic book story and your journey. So if you want to take it away, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your comic collecting journey.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for having me on. It's good to finally talk to you. I know we've emailed a couple of times, and I've spoken to members of your team. So obviously good to interact face to face as it was. As I was saying earlier, I was born in 1973. So by the time 76, 77 came along, roughly 4 years old, when I first started getting interested in comics. I grew up in a very sleepy little village in Lancashire in England. And in England, we don't really have comic shops. You used to get corner store shops that were called newsagents that would sell newspapers, confectionery, and tobacco and that sort of thing. And they'd occasionally get comics in, but there certainly wasn't American comics. So we didn't know about Marvel and DC really at that time. All I could do was look at the pictures because I couldn't read. My reading level was so poor at the time, from 4, 5, 6, that my mum was called into school to have a chat with the teachers, and they were concerned about how far behind I was falling. And my mum explained that I wasn't interested in books, and I only seemed to want to read comics, and they were seen as a almost a harmful medium at the time. They were no good, they were throwaway stuff. And the teacher told my mum at the time that she didn't care if I wanted to read Playboy, as long as she was giving me something to read. So after that meeting, she went out. She went to a newsagent's shop, bought every comic that they had available.
Wow.
And I sat there and was silent for the rest of the day and read them all. And within 2 months of that, my reading level had gone to that of a 13-year-old,
Wow.
which was our school system was up to 11, and then we joined secondary school, and it was all down to reading comics, and that was the start of my love affair, really, that has carried on ever since.
Yeah, I know that there's a long history of comics being, kind of bastardized as, rotting your brain, and there's even, highly collectible stuff. I'm sure a lot of people watching this know about the Seduction of the Innocent, which, have you heard of the Werther? I can't remember his last name, but a psychologist. He wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which basically led to the Comics Code Authority. And
Right.
right. And so, yeah, now a lot of those books are very collectible, the ones that he mentioned in his books, which is kind of ironic. But yeah, they've, clearly there is some educational benefit to it, especially, when they spark and capture the interest of kids. So that's cool to see that it was such a part in getting your reading level up.
Absolutely, and they were educational as well. When I first started getting into American Marvel comics, when they first started coming over to the UK, like I said, they were available in specialty shops, but only really in the big cities: London, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow. They were obviously very well researched. I remember learning that it took light 8 minutes to get from the sun to Earth because I read it in an Avengers comic, and so things like that stick with you.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to add or advice for other collectors?
It's strange. I think you start off with what you like, and then you kind of get sidetracked into the insane amounts of money that some comics go for. So if you're looking to collect, you either want everything of something of a particular title or a particular run, or you're looking to become a collector of things that are going to pay you back later on in the day. It's difficult because if you're just collecting things that you like, that that aren't really going to appreciate in value, that you're spending a lot of money to complete that collection, but then what do you do with it at the end of that? So it has to be for the love of the hobby and the hunt of finding that one missing link sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. It was really cool to hear how comics played such a important role in you learning how to read, and it's always awesome to see, subscribers from across the pond. I really appreciate it, and thanks again.
well, thank you very much, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you,
Mhm.
Brian.
Clay, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Some of you guys might recognize Clay, as we were just talking about. He did a fantastic video with the Comics Den, which maybe we'll talk a little bit at some point in here. But we're here today just to talk about your collecting journey and just a collector spotlight type of thing. Tell us about your collection. I noticed a very beautiful wall behind you.
All
But
four walls in here are done the same. You can just only see one.
Nice. Yeah, you'll have to shoot me some, text me some pictures of all the walls, and we'll throw it up on the screen here.
My name's Clay. I live in Florida. I'm 51 years old. I started collecting, really taking care of my books and really getting into stories when I was about 13. I got into it from my father. My father did his whole life, and up until very recently, he collected still. We actually had a comic shop here in Edgewater. He did for several years, but ended up, between long story short, roofing company and trying to run the shop, there wasn't enough of him to manage both businesses. So he ended up shutting down the comic shop because roofing makes much better money. But my whole life growing up, me, my dad, and my brother, we would go to the comic shop, Genesis bookstore here in Edgewater. As a matter of fact, every single week we'd get our books, we'd go home, we'd read them. I worked, and my whole life, my comics are the only thing I've managed to hold on to my whole life.
That's
I've lost
that's remarkable.
vehicles, shirts, clothes, I mean, homes, everything. But let me tell you, I've hung on to those pretty white boxes.
That's remarkable. That's remarkable because usually that's like, the one thing to go. People are like, so that's remarkable that you were able to, and it shows, how important they are to you and the priority they take in your life. So
My,
that's
my
cool.
mind is filled with some of the most incredible stories that I'll ever experience in my life from the different storylines of reading comics my whole life. People don't take enough time to truly appreciate and read the stories, and it's kind of sad now. I understand people want to make money at it and everything else, but if you're really worried about it, without just being without lack of a better word, a flipper, read your stories, man. The value will come later. It really will. Enjoy them. If it's a good story and it's good art and everything else, it'll absolutely come later, the value in it. You just got to let it go. People are too, it's an instantaneous world we live in right now. And it's almost kind of sad because everybody wants instantaneous results
Oh
instead
yeah.
of just, letting it percolate.
Hmm.
But
With that said, what is your number one storyline that was the most impactful to you from
honestly, the
vintage
entire
days?
Sandman series.
Wow, Sandman.
When
I
I
wasn't
Yeah,
expecting
I
that.
actually have one, an 8, and a 9.8, which were my original copies, believe it or not.
Wow. So you were able to keep kind of, I don't know if you saw the video with Tom where he would put the book in a he put the comic inside of a book to read it.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
mean, so how were you reading it then to keep it a
I
9.8?
just I lay it. I have huge hands, so I just lay it in there very gently. I go through it. I've always taken care and just taken care of my books, not because I always thought this is going to be extremely valuable. As I got older, of course, I started saying, I need to really watch these things and be careful with them because they can have a lot of value. It'll take care of my wife if something ever happened to me. And honestly, you're the first number that she calls, just so you know.
I
That's
appreciate
God's
that.
honest truth. If something were to ever happen to me, you're the first person she calls about my collection.
Yeah. There you go. I appreciate that, man.
But
That's really cool.
I
I'm
I
honored.
just read through gently. I still Those are this week's that I picked up. I still go weekly to buy new books and read my books. And the
Yeah.
only reason I'm sitting here is because I haven't read them yet.
So I think I saw today or this week that there was 572 new comics released this week.
Holy mackerel.
How do you choose what to pick, what to buy?
I have everything, believe it or not, my entire collection is in cover price, only for the fact that I can know what I have.
Right.
Now, one of the main things I really love is on Monday morning, Cover Price comes out with the new releases for Wednesday. And I mean, like this week, like you said, there was over 500 and something. There must be 60 different titles that they
Right.
actually do from all independent. And on Monday evening, when I get home from work, I go through and I look for anything obscure that I might want other than is on my pull list, because my pull
Mm-hmm.
list is Comic Central in Sanford right now. And I've
Mm-hmm.
had a pull list with them since 2011, I think. That's how long I've had a pull list with those guys. And, I'll go sometimes twice a month. I try to get up there, but at least once a month I go up to pick up my books, because I'm always in New Smyrna. It's about 45 minutes, and between work, it's just hard for me to get up there and get them, but I
Oh
do.
yeah.
And I go through, bag and board everything, put everything away and do. But just for example, like the obscurities, this was shown on there, which is an amazing Ivan Tao cover.
Oh God, dude,
Gorgeous.
yeah,
So,
Ivan
so
Tao.
I called him and I said, John, please, if you have one, pull it for me, put it back in my box.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that kind of relationship from being there so long and working with him for so long that they'll just pull it because they know I'm good for it. I come in, I've always come in, I've always picked up my books, I've never left them hanging. And they're
Yeah.
kind enough to wait out a month for me sometimes, which I know that's hard on a comic shop, because their margin of profit is very slim. People don't
Mm-hmm.
realize that, how slim it actually is. And to sit on somebody's books for a month, just knowing that I'll come in and get them, especially when certain ones, like give you the Ultimate Spider-Man, for example, when the number one, the regular cover came out, I had 2 cover A's in my box. And within a week of when that came out, they were $80 books.
Yeah.
But they never charged me. They charged me cover price. That's it. They didn't
Yeah.
go through my box and jack prices.
Yeah, and the other hard thing for a shop is it's not that, like, there's these books sitting in a pull list box that they can't even sell them if you don't pick them up,
Right.
sometimes, unless there's
Right.
a hot
Exactly.
thing. So,
Because the hot thing's already passed by. So now
right.
they've missed their window because someone didn't come in and pick them up.
Yeah, yeah, it's slim margins. It's still a dream of mine. I would love to own a comic shop and just break even for the community aspect of it. Like, if and
Right. Just to have
be,
a brick and mortar.
have a brick and mortar. And I don't man the counter or anything, but a place where I can go and go to my comic shop and have a community and pull lists and just do the whole thing. And
I mean,
it's
really think about those words you just said and how it resonates. I know it does with me, to walk into your comic shop.
yeah.
That,
I
that's
know.
incredible. I mean,
I
that's an
know.
incredible feeling. I get goosebumps thinking of that.
I
Just
know.
if I
I,
had one to walk in, that's amazing. I would
I
love that opportunity
I know.
at
And
some
I do
point.
I know I want to do it. It's just that, it just everyone I talk to is like, you're having success. Why would you like take out this chapter of like almost for sure not success? Like, but we'll see. We'll see what happens if I could figure out a way to do it where it can get the margins as tight as possible and the overhead
You
as
have to
low
do
as
you
possible.
have to do the online presence, even in the brick and the mortar, and that's the problem with a lot of the older shops. Is a lot of the older shop owners aren't willing to make that transition. They're still expecting walkthroughs, which is why they're struggling so hard. That you have to have an online presence.
Yeah.
It's everything in the comic industry right now.
Oh
You
yeah. I
have
mean,
to
if
have an
you
online
if you
presence.
have like a lot of the books behind you, like a Edge of Spider-Verse, and you're relying on walkthrough, and even though you have it at a great price, it's just numbers. A person's not going to walk through that's looking for that, or so
See that row right there, Brian?
yeah, that's
That took
beautiful,
me
man.
9 years. That's a first print in a 9.8.
Uh-huh.
That's a second print in a 9.8. That's a third print in a 9.8. That's a fourth print in a 9.8. That's a
Nice.
fifth print in a 9.8. That's the comic bug
What do you,
exclusive in a
yeah,
9.8.
what do they consider that? Do they consider that like a eighth print or something like
I
that?
think it is. I think it's like a sixth print is what they
Yeah,
consider,
yeah.
6 or 7. And then that one over there last year at MegaCon, Greg Land was actually there.
Oh
So
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
took the blank variant and I had him do the 1 in 25 Greg Land, the
There you
sketch
go.
on that one. and I got that done.
Well, we got to get. Do you have the 1 in 25?
No, no, I
We got
want
to
it bad.
we got to get you the 1 in 25.
I know.
The way the prices are at right now,
Oh, it's a
you
quarter
know,
of what it was 3 years ago.
yeah, yeah. And you might be able to figure out something you can trade off from
Hmm.
what you have to complete that row. But you don't have a spot for it on that row.
No, no, no. I got some over here though. I'll swap
Yeah.
them out.
No, I almost kind of like the sketch better, it's got a more
Yeah.
personal touch to it. You
Agreed,
get
agreed. I mean,
yeah.
it was a wonderful experience. I got pictures with him. I got to meet him and talk to him. It was fantastic. That's like last year alone too. The Fantastic collection, the whole
Yeah.
story and all that.
Hmm.
Darren was actually there last year at
Okay.
MegaCon. So I met him and I got to talking to him while I was standing in line with my grandson in a stroller right
Hmm.
there. And he was up at the CGC booth. And I was like, you know what? You, People, you got to be willing just to walk up and talk to people. You can't be starstruck. Because let me tell you, I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, Darren, my name is Clay. It's very nice to meet you. This is my grandson, which, by the way, my grandson's name is Luke Skywalker."
Hmm. Nice.
Last year, we also got Hayden Christian to sign a birth certificate, cross my son's name out, and say, "No, I am the father," and sign the birth certificate by Hayden Christian, Darth Vader, of my
Nice.
grandson, Luke Skywalker.
That's
But I walked up
hilarious.
to Darren and then talked to him, and we got to talking and everything else. I introduced him to my grandson. I told him, I'm really been waiting for one of your books to come on the open market because they really haven't too much yet. Because I would love to have part of your history and your father's story and your story in my personal collection. It'd be a very heartfelt thing for me. I would like that. So he turned around and he says, "All right, come here and walk with me." And he walked me over to this little booth where they had two short boxes full of all of his father's books that were from the Fantastic collection. He said,
Wow.
"Pick one." So I picked through. You see that Daredevil right there? The
Is
first
that
meeting, the John Romita with Spider-Man and Daredevil, the
Daredevil
Daredevil
16?
18. 16,
18?
yeah, 16 or 18. Yeah, 16.
16, yeah.
Okay. And I pulled it out and he said, "It's yours. Let's walk over to the booth." Walk over to the CGC booth, runs it through, puts it under his account for Express. He says, "There you go. Now you have one for your collection. It's been amazing meeting you." Right?
What? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
be willing, you
Yeah, so
know?
that's let me bring this to a point with a question because I think this ties into it. It's really evident that you get a lot of satisfaction and joy out of the collecting experience. The fact that you held on
Absolutely.
to all of these, even through losing other things in your life, and you held on to this. What piece of advice could you give to people that will help them increase the level of enjoyment that they get out of this hobby? I think you just mentioned one thing is, you know, put
Read.
yourself out there. Okay, read
Yeah,
there.
put yourself out there, but read your stories too. Truly appreciate them. I tell you what, the Sandman series, I think, of course, Neil Gaiman is, I mean, he's won all kinds of awards and stuff for his writing and everything else, but he is an absolutely mind-blowing writer. His depth and detail in his stories are just unbelievable. And anybody who has never read all 75 issues of Sandman is missing out. It's incredible. But take the time to really read the stories and appreciate them. And don't read it as, "Oh, this is a superhero. This is this." No, no, no. Truly, truly, and take the time to look at it as not just a picture book, but no different than a book, a novel, or anything else. You read Lord of the Rings or you read any of those from J.R. Tolkien. There's no different. They're just smaller stories. And let me tell you, there are every bit incredible stories in these small comic books as there are in the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the Harry Potter books or any of those storylines. So in 2017 at MegaCon, I went there. My wife had bought me the Stan Lee pass because it was his last year doing all his tours, of course. So I went there. I was going in. I had a bunch of books signed. I walked up to the front of the line. I got called his manager over. I asked him. I said, "Here's what I'd like. I'd like Stan Lee because I don't know if they do it at conventions you've been to, but in MegaCon they always set up a tattoo alley by Skin and Ink magazine. Okay, so there's a whole tattoo area inside MegaCon.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to the manager and I said, here's what I want. I'd like Stan Lee to autograph me across the back.
Ah.
I'm going to go straight to Tattoo Alley and get it done. And he started telling me, he's like, well, we really got to worry about his health and all this other stuff. I said, I understood. And then I pulled up my shirt and showed him this
Oh, snap. I can
entire
see that.
Phoenix
Yeah.
and Wolverine, and they're both in the appropriate costumes of the time that they met, which is why he's in the yellow and blue and she's in the green, because that was actually the first Phoenix. That's a costume she wore, and that's Wolverine's original at that time whenever she became the Phoenix.
Uh-huh.
So I went, and when I did that, he's like, I tell you what, come back at 6 o'clock. I said, okay. So I left, got out, went over to Tattoo Valley. I said, look, if this is happening, I need to have a tattoo artist ready for me. You got me? And he said, yes, I do. Because the MegaCon closes at 8. That's only 2 hours. 6 o'clock, I'm sitting there. We're waiting. I'm with my son. We're at the little CGC booth on the side because they have their own little small CGC booth. Whenever you leave the signing for Stan Lee, you can give it straight to them right there instead of having a signature in the Stan Lee lines of how it was. So I'm sitting there, 6:30, 6:45 comes around, nothing, nobody's there. I'm just sitting over there. All of a sudden, the manager comes out, walks over to the CGC booth. So I said, excuse me, sir, you remember you told me to come back at 6 about getting him to autograph me? He's like, yes, I forgot. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Walks back, comes back out. He's like, all right, come on. I said, do you mind if my son comes? And he says, no, absolutely. So we come out. He walks us all the way around the line. There's a curtain for a doorway, but there's also an armed guard. I'm talking a gun outside his shirt, an earpiece outside this curtain. He says, hang on a second. He walks inside, comes back out. He's like, all right, come in. So we walk in this little 10 by 10 room, and there's Stan Lee on a couch with an armed guard inside, and there was one outside and the manager. And we sit there for the next 20 minutes having the most incredible conversations, just hanging out.
Man.
And then the
Jeez.
manager says, here's what he wants. He wants you to autograph him for a tattoo. And Stan Lee says, I don't do tattoos. I mean, he is truly a cut up. He really is. I know people always say that, but he's hilarious. So then I turn around and I pull up my shirt and show him, and he falls back in the couch laughing. He's like, 70 years of this, and it still amazes me what fans will do. He says, didn't that hurt, son? I said, unbelievably, unbelievably. So then and my son, he starts to autograph me with a magic marker. My son's trying to sneak some pictures, because photo ops, $120 a piece when he was around, that's what they were. He's literally autographing me. And then we ran over to Tattoo Alley, hurried up, ran over there because now it's 7:30, almost 8 o'clock. Tattoo artist, go ahead and tattoos it. He tattoos his full signature right across my whole lower back, just below the Wolverine and Jean Grey. Then across from me, the table where I'm getting tattooed is a big infinity gauntlet sitting there on the table. And it was a raffle that said, win a hand sketch drawing and tattoo by win a hand sketch drawing by Stan Lee and a tattoo of drawing. I put in 4 raffle tickets. This was on Saturday that this was happening. Sunday is when they did the drawing for the raffle. So we're over there. Skin and Ink magazine is the one who does all the tattoos and all that. And they set up over there. It's all being video recorded. There was a full article write-up in Skin and Ink magazine of the whole thing, and they draw my ticket.
That's
So
awesome, man.
I went around, and of course I'm meeting Stan Lee again. The manager's like, see, I'm sorry I forgot about you yesterday. See what being patient does?
Exactly. Amen.
So,
See that? Yeah, it wasn't patient, it was persistence.
yeah.
If you would have just patiently waited, you wouldn't have got it. And
No.
yeah, so yeah, you have to speak up, you have to get
Well,
out there.
they did a full write-up in 2017, Skin and Ink magazine. There's a full write-up of the whole article, photos of me winning it. I have that sketch drawing, just walking the Tattoo Alley. And the sketch drawing is literally nothing but a little stick figure of a guy with a music note on it.
Nice.
That's what
Yeah.
Stan Lee drew.
That's what he
I
did.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I know.
But,
That's what he's good. Yeah.
So
what he's known for.
I had that drawing, and we walked over to Tattoo Alley. I had offers of over, 10 grand. People were trying to get it from me, trying to go over there. I'm like, hell no, it's sitting in that safe right there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I have the blue carbon copy of where they did it all, and full pictures and everything else. So that was an amazing experience, all by simply saying, you know what, why not ask?
Yep.
Why not? What's he going to say? No. And even when he said no, I showed him, look at my back. Do you see that?
Yeah.
I'm there. And he's like, all right, fine, come back.
Yeah, so there you have it, folks. You got to advocate for yourself, speak up. I mean, I know personally. I mean, imagine if you didn't do that and you didn't have that experience. What would happen is you wouldn't know. And
Yeah.
I know that there are many stories that I don't get to tell like you just told because I didn't advocate for myself or I clammed up or I didn't persist. And that is a fantastic message is think about the stories that you could be telling if you just persist, speak up, advocate for yourself. I think that's awesome, man. Well, Clay, thank you so
Absolutely.
much, man. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun.
I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. All right. So that's it, folks. If you stuck with me this long, you are a true believer, a day one in my book. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Thank you for sticking around. And if you want to come on the show, don't forget to shoot an email to brycecomics@gmail.com and we can get something scheduled. We got those giveaways here. If you subscribe, comment, and like, head over to Whatnot. Check us out over there. $15 coupon down in the description. And we got these fancy new hats if you are so inclined to add a hat to your hat collection. Thank you once again. Appreciate you. Talk to you soon. Bye.